This next case is about Roudi Shmaly, a Syrian national who was tragically murdered while he was at work at the chicken hub on the D'Souza Road in May 2023. Now, Rudy was considered as kind, loving, always willing to help, and on this day, his life was taken in a most tragic way. Now, Rudy's assailant, as the case went along, we found out was 16 years old, which adds another level of tragedy to this situation. Now, we're going to go into the details of the case and we're going to see how it played out and what happened in the end. In 2023, at our local restaurant called Chicken Hub on the D'Souza Road is where Rudy worked. Now, Rudy was the head chef at this restaurant after he made Antigua his home. The restaurant was also adjacent to a mini mart called Pick and Mix. They shared the same building and the same owner. And this is where Rudy flourished. Now, Rudy was totally ingrained into the community. Everybody knew him by name and everybody loved him. While working at the restaurant, Rudy met and became friends with the cashier, one of the cashiers that worked at the mini mart next door. Her name was Geraldine Lang, and Geraldine would describe Rudy as loving, kind, helpful, and always smiling. What started out as a normal May month, a normal day, would soon turn into a tragedy and no one could have imagined. Around 1 p.m. on May 22nd, 2023, Geraldine was at work restocking shelves at the mini mart and she heard a voice call out to her and she realized it was Rudy. So she went and greeted him. They had a little chit chat and then Rudy went over to the restaurant. Now, Geraldine went back to work after ordering some food from the restaurant. However, no one was aware that tragedy was about to unfold. 6 minutes after this interaction, Geraldine was assisting a customer and just happened to look up and froze. There's a man in a mask with a black and silver handgun pointed directly at her. He said absolutely nothing. He charged his way behind the counter, and Geraldine was so fearful for her life, she just opened the cash register, hoping not to get hurt. The man put his hand into the cash register and grabbed and stuffed the money into his hand was about $987. A security officer who was nearby by the name of Dion Bryden carefully slipped out and ran over to the restaurant to warn Rudy of what was happening next door. Now, Rudy, who was always willing to help, rushed over to the mini mart. As Rudy rushed over to the mini mart, the gunman saw him and the gunman backed away from the counter as Rudy approached the mini mart. And while he backed away from the counter, there was a sudden crack. It was a gunshot. Geraldine dropped to the ground, and then moments later, there was a second gunshot, and then silence. When Geraldine decided to get up, the sight she saw was completely devastating. There was Rudy on the floor with blood pooling from his head. So Geraldine called her boss, Dr. Hannah Harani, who was there within minutes. By the time the ambulance arrived, Rudy, who was only 26 years old, was pronounced dead at 1:35 p.m. Now, the assailant's name was not mentioned in any news article, any news stories, because he was underage. And I'm not going to mention his name here for the same reason his name was not mentioned. However, we do have a name. Now, while reviewing the CCTV footage, the police came across these two young guys with a black shoulder bag, which will become a very important part of this investigation. As the CCTV footage continued to play, the police was able to see what happened. Now, the assailant emerged from a side road right next to the mini mart, wearing a black mask, black hoodie with a black handbag. He entered the mini mart with a silver and black handgun, pointed it at the cashier, and forced her to open the cash register. And moments later, he took the cash. Now, the moment that would change everything is when Rudy rushed over to the mini mart to help his friend. And as Rudy appeared in the doorway of the mini mart, the assailant turned towards him and fired twice. Rudy collapsed to the floor and the assailant fled with the bag around his neck and the gun still in his hand. As this happened, there was a police officer who was driving along All Saints Road who saw a woman running terrified. And then he saw a man sprinting from the mini mart with a bag and a gun in his hand. The police decided to follow him. And while following him, he disappeared. He ducked into a shortcut, met an accomplice, and they were gone. Around 2 p.m., the assailant's brother returned home at Browns Avenue. He saw a black mass on the floor. Suspicious, he questioned his brother, asking him, "What were you doing all day?" His brother lied. He said, "I was home waiting for you." What we didn't know at this time was that the assailant was just released from jail 2 days prior to this day. And his father has been trying to get him to do something constructive, find a job, find something to do that's going to keep you out of trouble. Now, his father sent him to a construction site, to a contractor that the father is familiar with, to see if the contractor can find something for him to do. However, the contractor did not accept him to do anything. The contractor said, "You know what, I can't do this." And the contractor gave him bus fare and sent him back to town. Instead of going home, he went to his brother's house and from there to the mini mart. Later that afternoon, about 4:30 p.m., the police had tracked the assailant to his home. They found him in the backyard trying to escape, and that's how they detained him. During questioning, the assailant led the police to a house on Craven Road, Otters, and police searched the assailant's home, where they found black pants. That was the same pants the assailant was wearing in the CCTV footage, and they also found some more evidence that linked him to the murder of Roudi. Questioning had to be done in the presence of a parent or guardian because the assailant was underage. Now, the assailant's first story during questioning was that he was forced into committing the robbery at the mini mart by someone else, and what happened was, while he was in the mini mart committing the robbery, Roudi came in, tried to throw something at him, and the gun went off twice. This was his first story. Of course, the story didn't stay that way. In the second statement, he stated that he found the gun in an old car months before this, and he decided to take it, and that he was the only one that was involved in this robbery. He also said while running, he dropped the handbag and the gun in the alley, and the pants that he was wearing in the CCTV footage that they found was the actual pants that he was wearing. His new statement was that after returning from Bendel's, which was the construction site that he went to, he met up with a young man whose idea was to commit the robbery, and the young man gave him the gun and the bag. And after committing the robbery, he stated that he gave back the gun and the handbag to the person. However, no matter what stories he tried to spin, the CCTV footage, the witnesses, and the evidence all pointed to him committing the robbery and the murder. As we know, the assailant was only 16 years old, which is a tragedy within itself. He was arrested and charged with the murder of Roudi Shmaly, 26 years old, innocent young man. Roudi was loved by his family. He was a provider. He was a brother, a friend, uncle. And all he was doing was trying to help his friend. Now, there is something called a social inquiry report that the court does, where they go and find out what is it that's going on in this person's life that's causing them to act out in these ways, mostly for minors, of course, right? What's causing them to do this? Now, the social inquiry states that the report highlighted that the assailant lost his mother at the age of 6, and his upbringing was troubled with poor parental supervision and indulgent grandparents. The community described him as an unremorseful, badly behaved, and a menace to society. The victim, Roudi Shmaly, was the family breadwinner, and his death had severe emotional and financial impacts on his family. Now, we know your upbringing, your how you were raised, is what determines a lot what kind of adult you're going to be. We know this, right? So this is what they're trying to figure out, like what is it that's happening in his life. These factors, of course, will contribute to the type of person that you are. Now, the sentencing considerations. These are the sentencing considerations. The Eastern Caribbean sentencing guidelines were consulted. While the appropriate sentence for an adult will be 30 years, the assailant is a child under the law, limiting his sentence to 3 years. Additional measures were imposed to protect society and supervise him post-release. Now, these are the measures: a curfew from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. for 1 year, mandatory reporting every Wednesday and Saturday at the local police station, compliance monitoring by the police. Failure to comply could trigger a reconsideration of his sentence under the Child Justice Act. Now, the judge's remarks were: the judge acknowledged the seriousness of the crime and the threat to society, describing him as a disaster waiting to happen if not properly supervised and rehabilitated. The court urged family and society to take action. The court urged family and society to take active steps in rehabilitating the assailant. Now, his final sentence was 3 years imprisonment with 555 days already served deducted. Curfew and police reporting applies for 1 year after release. And this is what the assailant received because he was underage. Now, this is the story of Roudi Shmaly. If you want to talk about it in the comments, we can. But this is overall a tragic case. Nonetheless, no wins in this case. The assailant was underage, 16 years old, and the victim was an innocent man just trying to provide for his family and help his friend, and he lost his life. Thank you for listening.